Hello, YouTubers. How you doing? World famous Kempful folk artist Dennis Ramsay of Canada, me. I'll gladly do your fine art, folk art, or abstract art paintings for 100 grand a piece, up to 1 or 2 million bucks each. Give me a jingle. 902-365-5044, Canada. I live in the small town of Kempful, Nova Scotia. Today's topic is serial killer Gary Ridgway, the Green River serial killer of Washington State. He mostly killed prostitutes. He'd pick 'em up late at night, take 'em to isolated spots, have sex with them, and usually he strangled them to death. Then he'd discard the bodies down by the river. That's why they called him the Green River Killer. He used to be a necrophiliac like Ted Bundy. Gary would have sex with the dead prostitutes a week or two later. Gary Ridgway was a real sicko, a real weirdo, and a bad guy. He picked on mostly prostitutes and hookers. He'd pick 'em up late at night, have sex with them in isolated spots, then strangle them to death or murder them, and then he'd have sex with their dead bodies a few days later. They convicted Gary Ridgway of 50 murders that they know of. He possibly could have killed 75, who knows? The total is unknown, just like Ted Bundy. Gary Ridgway was a real sicko. For a living, he had a good job. He used to paint cars and trucks. He used to spray paint them. Gary Ridgway was a loner and used to pick up the hookers late at night, have sex with them, and kill them, and then discard the bodies down by the river. That's why they called him the Green River Killer. Gary Ridgway. He was a real sicko like Ted Bundy. They confirmed that he killed 50 women, Gary Ridgway, which he was convicted for. He's doing something like 300 years in prison. He'll never get out. Like Ted Bundy, Gary Ridgway was a real parasite, a sicko, who preyed on prostitutes because they were easy pickings and easy prey. Being a prostitute is a dangerous job. They'll go with anybody for cash. And usually they could end up with a killer or a bad person that could beat them or beat them to death, like Gary Ridgway would strangle them to death. Gary Ridgway killed 50 people that they know of, and that he was convicted of. But I think the number is much larger. I think it's more like 100 people probably Gary Ridgway had killed. Like I said before, they were all prostitutes. Sex service girls, hookers. And the police didn't care about them because they weren't prominent people. It wasn't like the teacher's daughter. Know what I mean? These were hookers that had sex for money. Cash. Gary Ridgway is doing natural life in prison. He'll die in prison. He's doing roughly about 300 years. I think it's something like 365 years. But like Ted Bundy, he was sneaky, clever, and would prey on the hookers and prostitutes. And he strangled them to death or knife them to death and beat them to death, and then have sex with their dead bodies a week or two later like Ted Bundy had done. Gary Ridgway was a real sicko, a pervert, a parasite, and a bad guy. Women should not be prostitutes because you don't know if you're going to make it home that night alive or dead. Being a prostitute is a dangerous job. Many hookers lose their lives to evil Johns who pick them up for sex and pleasure, then murder them. It's very sad. My advice to women is don't be a hooker or prostitute because it's a dangerous job. You could end up murdered or strangled to death or beat to death. Gary Ridgway was a bad guy, and he was a parasite. He would prey on hookers and prostitutes. There were some of his victims that were not prostitutes that he had picked up and murdered. There were several of those. But the majority of the Gary Ridgway victims were hookers and prostitutes. That's true. Anyhow, please share and subscribe to the Dennis Ramsay YouTube channel. Give me a thumbs up on my videos, shall you? It's a very cold winter day in Kempful, Canada. Dennis Ramsay will gladly do your folk art, fine art, or abstract art paintings for $100,000 a piece, up to $1, $2, or $3 million each. Give me a jingle, 902-365-5044. I've got caller ID that'll take down your phone number and name. So leave a message, or just call, and I'll talk to you on the telly. I live in the small town of Kempful, Canada. But Gary Ridgway was convicted of 50 murders, but more likely killed about 100 people like Ted Bundy had done. He was a necrophiliac, a sexual pervert. He would have sex with the dead bodies and the stiff ones. Gary was really sick, and he probably had a mental illness. What it was, I'm not sure. He might have been a sociopath or a psychopath, who knows. Please share and subscribe to the Dennis Ramsay YouTube channel. Thank you. Peace out. Have a nice day. Give me a thumbs up on my videos. Share and subscribe today. A-OK. Have a nice day.